The morning started off just like any other in my quiet, cul-de-sac suburb where everything looked pristine, hedges trimmed to uniformity, mailboxes polished to a bureaucratic gleam, flags gently flapping in mild breeze, and the ever-looming presence of the HOA watching like it was some kind of suburban intelligence agency. I had retired to this place for the peace. After 2 decades serving in some of the deadliest regions of the world as a Navy SEAL, where silence meant survival and instincts meant life, I wasn't looking for war anymore. I just wanted to drink my black coffee in peace on my porch, watch the squirrels dart across the street, and listen to the hum of distant lawn. But peace is never permanent, especially when you're surrounded by power-drunk men who never saw a battlefield but think a clipboard and a fake badge make them warriors. That morning, I spotted the familiar black SUV creeping down the street, like a predator sniffing for prey. It was marked HOA enforcement with oversized decals like they were proud to be the self-declared law of the land. The vehicle rolled up to my driveway without hesitation, its tires crunching with arrogant purpose. I watched through the blinds as the driver, a tall man in mirrored aviators and a pressed tactical vest labeled HOA security, stepped out and strode toward my front door like he was about to breach a terrorist compound. He didn't knock, he didn't ring, he just pulled out a shiny brass key from a ring and jammed it into my lock like he owned the place. My pulse slowed. Funny thing, when most people get startled, their heart races. But mine slowed. Years of combat had rewired my reflexes. I stepped away from the window, silently, my feet not even creaking on the hardwood floor. I moved like water, like I had back in the teens when we entered hostiles' homes in the dead of night. I stopped 3 feet from the door. He was cursing outside. The key wasn't working. That was because I had upgraded the lock, something the HOA didn't like, but something completely within my rights. Apparently, they hadn't gotten the memo. I listened as he muttered under his breath, jiggling the key furiously. Then there was a sound I'll never forget, the soft snick of a safety being disengaged. He drew his sidearm. A standard issue, Glock 17, held low and ready. My door still stood closed, but I could feel the heat of his nerves through the wood. He was sweating. Maybe he thought he was in a movie. Maybe he had watched too many SWAT documentaries. Or maybe he was stupid enough to believe the HOA gave him the right to point a gun at a private homeowner. I opened the door, not fast, not loud, just enough to step through, quiet as a ghost. The barrel came up, but it was too late. "You pointing that at me?" I said, voice cold and even. He flinched slightly, but tried to maintain his grip. "Step aside," he barked, trying to channel authority. "This is official HOA business. You violated multiple codes: unapproved door lock, unsanctioned fence paint, and an overdue assessment. We have the right to enter the property." I looked at him, really looked. He was early 40s, military haircut, but no real posture. His hands shook slightly. He didn't know how to hold the weapon, right? His thumb was too far over the slide, his stance too squared. He was trying to imitate a soldier but had never trained a day in his life. "You pulled a gun over a late payment?" I asked, stepping toward him slowly. "Back off," he yelled. I kept moving. In a flash, I closed the gap, knocked his wrist off angle, popped the magazine from the Glock with one hand while racking the slide with the other. The round fell to the porch like a discarded lie. I held out the now empty pistol by the barrel. "You done?" I asked. His eyes were wide now. He didn't say anything. He just took the weapon and backed down 2 steps, stunned into silence. "Let me explain something," I continued. "You don't have jurisdiction, you don't have training, and you don't bring a weapon onto private property unless you're prepared to use it and die trying. But you're lucky. I'm not your enemy. I'm just a man trying to enjoy his retirement." He mumbled something into his walkie and returned to the SUV, retreating like a defeated scout. But I knew better than to believe it was over. Bureaucracies don't take humiliation well, especially when they're filled with men trying to feel important. That evening, I received a visit not from the enforcer, but from the HOA's president, Gerald Walters, a slick-haired, power-hungry ex-politician who had found a second life ruling over property lines and mailbox colors. He showed up with a clipboard and a smug smile, accompanied by 2 more men in polos who looked like they had once been high school linebackers, but now carried laser pointers and HOA handbooks like Bibles. "Mr. Keller," he said, oozing fake charm, "there was an incident today involving one of our enforcement officers. He claims you assaulted him." I didn't invite them in. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, towering over Walters. He pointed a loaded weapon at me. I said, "On my property, after trying to break in with a master key, I could have killed him, legally. Instead, I let him walk away with his pride bruised. That was me being kind." Walters chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "We have rules here, Mr. Keller. You may have a military background, but this community runs on order, not combat." I leaned in slightly. "You picked the wrong man to threaten." The following week, they escalated. Fines arrived daily, sometimes 2 or 3 at a time. $500 for non-regulation mailbox, $250 for overgrown grass. $1,000 for unauthorized exterior modification, all of which were fabricated or exaggerated. I noticed drones hovering over my backyard, lights blinking red, capturing evidence. My water was shut off for 2 days under the excuse of pipe upgrades. When I called the utility company, they had no record of any work orders. It was psychological warfare suburban style. But I was trained for worse. I set up my own surveillance. Night vision cams, motion-activated mics, encrypted logs. I logged every violation, every visit, every whisper. And then I discovered that HOA had been using illegal master keys to enter homes without permission for months, mostly targeting veterans, widows, and elderly who couldn't fight back. I had recordings, I had names, I had a war file. The final straw came when I returned home one afternoon and found my back gate open, the lock clipped, and muddy boot prints leading to my shed. Inside, nothing stolen, but a small device had been placed behind the wall panel. A bug. They were spying now. That night, I called an old friend, Sam Torres, now working at the Department of Homeland Security. I gave him a copy of my file. Sam didn't laugh. He promised he'd start a quiet inquiry. But I wasn't waiting. The next morning, I suited up, not in camo or body armor, but clean jeans, boots, and a button-up. I walked straight into the HOA's office during their closed session meeting. They weren't expecting me. Walters stood up like a rabbit, spotting a hawk. "You're trespassing, Mr. Keller." I said nothing. Just walked to the center of the room, placed a thick folder on the table, and pulled out a USB. "Everything is here: illegal entries, harassment, false fines, coordinated surveillance, and weapon misuse by an unlicensed officer. You've been abusing your authority, and I have it all. This goes to Homeland Security in 24 hours, unless you back off." The silence was deep. One of the enforcers looked like he wanted to run. Walters's face went pale. "You wouldn't try me," I said. "I've taken down warlords with fewer resources than your little HOA kingdom." That was the end of it. The fines vanished. The drones disappeared. The master keys were deactivated. The enforcer with the Glock resigned. And Walters, well, he was suddenly stepping away for health reasons. I returned home that evening to my porch. Coffee, warm, sun setting. My flag waved gently above me. I was at peace again. For now, but the cameras stayed on, and so did my instincts, because in a world where power hides behind paperwork, you don't let your guard down. Not ever. Even though the so-called HOA cop had retreated with a disarmed Glock and a shattered ego, and even after I delivered my warning to the board with a file full of surveillance and hard proof, I knew peace wouldn't last long. Not with men like Gerald Walters still breathing behind that smug politician's smile. And certainly not in a neighborhood where HOA meant harass our Americans. The quiet that followed my threat was too quiet, like the kind you get before a mortar hits. And I'd heard that silence before. In Kandahar, in Mosul, in countless godforsaken corners of the earth, where men tried to push the weak for power, and were shocked when the weak pushed back harder. They didn't come at me with guns this time. No, Walters and his cronies had learned that lesson well enough. But what they lacked in tactics, they made up for in persistence and paperwork. It began again with a series of anonymous complaints. My grass was suddenly too dry. Even though I had installed a smart irrigation system, my trash bins were visible from the curb, though they were inside a fenced enclosure. My porch light was too bright and allegedly disturbed the sleep of nearby residents. Though I only had one neighbor within 50 feet, and he was legally blind. They were testing me again, using bureaucratic red tape as their ammunition, hoping I'd either fold or strike back too hard and give them something real to work with. I didn't fold, but I didn't go loud either. Instead, I went quiet, real quiet. I installed facial recognition cams, monitored HOA office hours, even planted a few listening devices in the potted bushes just outside the meeting hall, the same ones they used for their confidential plan.